Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Well, it seems that Microsoft wasn't done with all of its news and announcements. I thought we'd actually covered everything that was going to come out of the pipeline in the last few weeks, but here they come out with Windows 365 as a subscription service and announcing another version of, well, I don't know if you call it a significant update, but their usual 2-yearly update of Windows 10, and it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Drip feeding us, Ben. Why haven't they told us this sooner?
But isn't this it's usually the Microsoft playbook of trying to please every platform at once? The Windows 10 stuff is obviously fairly straightforward. I think that was not entirely unexpected because they were on a twice a year kind of update cycle, and it seems like they're going to still keep doing that even though Windows 11's coming out. The 365 one is the one that sort of caught my attention because obviously there's already Office 365 or Microsoft 365, which you can access all their apps on, which then led me to think, excuse me, well, what is the purpose of this? Because really, you're only wanting to use the apps, right? That's what you would do to stream apps through a browser. So what would be the advantage of streaming the operating system through a browser? And the only, in some of the commentary that I've seen around it, it seems to be focused around, like if you're a enterprise on a budget or a educational system provider or something like that, you could, feasibly, I guess, go out and buy a bunch of $300 laptops that don't cost much, and then you can stream the operating system just through the one app that cheap computer can run, and all of the processing power is done on the back end by Microsoft on the operating system side. So it's almost a way of getting a more expensive computer without actually forking out the big cash for it. And I think it's also telling that it's only actually available at this stage to enterprise and small business or whatever. It's not actually a consumer product yet.
Yeah, well, I'm only guessing at this, but it sounds suspiciously like a better version of a Chromebook. So I can imagine maybe Microsoft, they've already got the Surface. Maybe they'll have a Surface A or something, some other name like that. And effectively, because they've generally, I guess, got all the apps, they might be a little bit more effective than a Chromebook. But I like Chromebooks. I don't find them particularly useful for myself, but that's probably because they've only got Google apps running on them. But this is quite interesting because, really this is sort of where they said they wanted computing to go 20 years ago. So maybe they started working on this 10 years ago and they haven't been able to stop.
Actually, that's a good point. It seems like a direct shot across the bow of the Chromebook, actually, more than anything else. And this whole, Microsoft Windows everywhere kind of, and actually not just Windows everywhere, but pretty much their entire software catalog, putting it out everywhere. I think that this is just another example of them reflecting that strategy. And it seems to be working for them, given that, they've transitioned from Windows being the money generator for them to, I guess, cloud services being the money generator.
I guess so. And if you think about it, the Chromebook locks Chrome into a Chromebook. However, with this Windows 365, I guess you could have a Mac and you could be running your Windows in a browser if you don't like OS X.
I guess I can just toss my Parallels virtual machine installation out the window now, but if they don't charge me too much anyway. All right. We'll segue across to a different story now, and talk of the week. Richard Branson blasting himself into the stratosphere and beyond. There's a lot of publicity around it. He was on the Colbert late night show the other day. Sort of promoting it all. There's two aspects that I wanted to cover with this, and obviously Neil deGrasse Tyson had his little bit about did he actually go into space, and he seemed to think probably not. And I think this was tying into what we were discussing the other week about where does space start, and it would seem that he was kind of sort of coming out of the edge of potentially where it could be. But, Tyson was going into, could he see the curvature of the Earth? Did he actually go anywhere? All that sort of stuff. I don't think it takes away from the achievement, I guess. And it was a good publicity stunt, if you can call it that, to advertise space travel. I guess if it was going to be one of those billionaires, he was probably the best one to do it, given the flamboyant nature of the man and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, there's two things to this, and the Kármán line is thought to be the edge of space at 100 k's, which sounds pretty arbitrary anyway. I've always wondered if the US goes for the 50-mile, 80k limit, because that allows a whole lot of their early rocket research in the 60s to qualify as space travel. So,
yeah,
and they set some of the speed records as well at that height. But for me, no one on Branson's flight was wearing a spacesuit, and for me, you don't go into space unless you wear a spacesuit. So. I don't buy it.
But what about this other adjunct story that came out a bit later that, there was this whole thing where he supposedly rode his bike to the launch site. He rode in, suited up, and then went out. And it turned out that the whole video had been pre-recorded ahead of time. In the misinformation world that we're living in, I'm sure the conspiracy theorists were wondering if he actually had gone into space at all. Whether did he fake it? I thought that was quite an odd little addition to the whole saga, I guess.
Well, I thought it was very brave of him to go. I mean, he said, let's not be cynical. He didn't go a week early just to beat Bezos, but it certainly looks that way.
It was convenient that he was able to, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. So, I mean, let's see now how many flights they actually get going. I mean, for Virgin Galactic to be successful, obviously they need to, dominate, at least in the next few years, space tourism. And look, whether or not you think it's actually space, I guess he'll be there first, and he'll be ferrying people up there. I don't know, like I said, I think a few weeks back when we were speaking, I know the balloon ride's a lot lower, only gets to about 20k, I think, or 30k, but for me that sounds like more of an adventure.
I mean, again, I think that's probably a good way to look at it. Regardless, it would still be quite an interesting sort of trip to take. If it wasn't,
I'd rather have 6 hours, 6 hours rather than 15 minutes.
Yeah, and the cost would have to come down a bit as well. I would assume. All right. All right. Well, let's turn again, and we have to come back to the favorite topic of 2020 and now 2021, which is the pandemic. And, Australia's found itself in a rather interesting position again, with now Victoria now in lockdown. So that's, along with New South Wales, the two biggest states in the country are now effectively in lockdown, affecting, just under half the population, and it's getting full on because the Delta strain's doing its thing, making its way around. Yeah. Obviously, there's been lots of discussion again about approaches. What do we do? How are things going to look in 6 months' time, 12 months' time? What's the trajectory out of this? All that sort of thing. And then obviously there's this question of am I protected if I'm fully vaccinated? Why do I have to keep adhering to restrictions if I am vaccinated? How many people does it take? What percentage of the population does it take to be fully vaccinated before things like lockdowns don't happen again? Just sticking with why you still need to live to the restrictions even though you're vaccinated. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated now, but I can understand that the best part of the vaccine is really more about the fact that it prevents serious disease as its primary objective, I guess. And I think I don't know if that's been properly communicated out, that people might expect that they get their jab and then it's fine, they can do whatever they want, but they can still potentially transmit the virus to unvaccinated people, which is kind of the underlying issue.
Look, that's a really good point. And unfortunately, I don't think enough of the good points around vaccination have actually really been communicated. One of them is that, sure, we won't open up, until we maybe get 80% of the population vaccinated, but at least dangle a carrot for those that are out there vaccinated, at least tell them that maybe in 3 to 6 months they will get freedoms, and exactly as you've said, the problem is that even when you're vaccinated, you can still communicate the disease, and that's just comes down to individual immune responses. So even though you're protected from serious illness, you can still spread it, at least, for a shorter period, and you're also more likely to be asymptomatic. So it does complicate things, and that's why the only reason that we can have confidence is when we get to levels like 80% of vaccination. And, I think everyone should be encouraged. And in Australia as well, it should just be on a first come, first serve, because that's how you get the numbers up.
Well, that's interesting in that discussion around, I guess, herd immunity, for lack of a better word, because that's what people are focused on in terms of what the number is, etc. And it's instructive, I guess, to see what's happening in some other countries like the US. I'm thinking of the US in particular, where you see scenes now of as long as you're vaccinated, now you can go out and do a lot of the old school regular activities that you used to. So, where I guess, you're not allowed, you're not permitted to go into, say, a stadium, for instance, unless you've been vaccinated. Or we referred to the Late Show before with with Branson. So he's got like a stipulation that all of the audience, they can come, but the only way they can get in is if they can show that they've been vaccinated, because they're going to be in that the theatre, for the time when they're recording. And I find that quite interesting, because you're starting to see that already happen in other countries. And then, of course, there's the infamous Boris example over in the UK, where he's called Freedom Day and said, from this day we're just gonna open up, and I guess what they're at. I can't remember the exact numbers. I don't know if it's 60% or something like that, but and that's much lower than the 80% figure that some of the leaders here have been talking about. And
they've got 60% full vaccination, and they've had about 8% infection. So they're up around the 70%. So they should achieve their 80% reasonably soon.
And that kind of brings into question the whole thing of when is the right time to open up. And I guess that's where the discussion comes from. What does that mean when we go forward? Because, as we were talking about before we got on, like at some point we open up, and then that's going to open the floodgates for travel and moving things around. We haven't had flu for the past 2 years, but part of the reason we used to get so many flu cases is because they would come in to the country and circulate. Right. So COVID wouldn't be any different in that respect.
No, and I think it's important to acknowledge as well that everywhere else in the world they've handled COVID very differently, as in there hasn't been any real restriction on travel or moving around. Even though they've had lockdowns, they've been more sort of personal responsibility focused, even though they've had complete lockdowns. But, it's more about keeping yourself safe. And look, that's simply because the numbers have been so huge right from the start that there's very little you can do effectively. I guess they're at the point now, certainly the people I talk to overseas, where they're just tired. They're tired of living under COVID. And so now I guess they're getting close to the numbers they need. Let's hope that it works for them, because it's been really disruptive everywhere else in the world. We've been very lucky here in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, we might wrap it up, and just a note. So I guess podcasting's still a good activity to do while you're in lockdown. I guess I can't go outside at the moment. This is actually the 5th lockdown that Victoria's gone through. We've already discussed it on the show in previous episodes. There's a sense, I guess, here that we all know what to do now, because we're such veterans at at this now. A little bit of a different story in New South Wales, because I think this is really their first serious lockdown post the initial one that happened, and I think it kind of took them all by surprise and is a bit of a shock to the system. And hopefully that kind of represents a shock to the system nationwide, that, it's still here, it still has to be dealt with, and, we need to get on with getting vaccinated and moving things along. Otherwise, Australia could potentially be left behind if we don't deal with it.
That's it. The only way out of this is vaccination. So, make it easy. And if you're not vaccinated, go and get a shot.
Absolutely. All right. So don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right. So that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.